Welcome to I Guess I'll Do It with Pet House. I am super excited about my guest today. He is one half of the top-rated radio show in Philadelphia, Preston and Steve. Today, I have Steve Morrison. So, Steve, thank you for being here, man.
Pat, it's great to be here. You've always been incredibly helpful and supportive with our show and charity events that we've asked you to be a part of. So it's my honor.
Thank you, man. No, you guys have been great to me. There's been the comedy shows at Camp Out for Hunger, and I know we did that charity event with Jim Brewer at the Punchline. That was a lot of fun. You guys have been great to me, and I appreciate it. So here in Philadelphia, where I live and where you live, you are known for being on the morning show, Preston and Steve, but you got your start in entertainment by doing comedy, and you're from Long Island, correct?
Right. I was born in Manhattan, which is one of the rare. I'm actually one of the rare people that can actually say I was born in Manhattan, Columbus Circle in Manhattan, and then we after a protracted sort of thing moved out to the island. This is if you've ever seen the movie Brooklyn, that's kind of my parents, the Irish.
Okay.
So out to the island, and from there, went to. Always had an affinity for comedy. Always loved pop culture, television, film, TV, the whole thing. Everything that I did was somehow based around comedy. And then eventually went to school. My college is on Long Island, and I say on Long Island. That's how you know I'm from Long Island.
Yes.
And so went for television and film. Radio was the third in the cluster of things that I was really focused in on. Television and film were they're more of the main elements. And then when I was there, I sort of after I finished college, I sort of got fascinated with stand-up comedy, and started to do open mic nights and perform, and the rest is history. I won't do a soliloquy as I want to do a lot of times on the show. So I'll let you do what you do.
Dude, that was, I got to say, that was the best career synopsis I've ever heard, because you being in radio and doing stand-up, you get right to the point and you just nailed it. So you're so used to getting to it, and that must be torture with you in radio when you have a caller that just is fucking rambling.
Well, here's the dilemma. Is that I'm also naturally inclined to sort of an ADD. In fact, I clinically have ADD. I don't even know, to what level, and apparently I have a pretty intense level of ADD, which I believe suits me well in comedy. But I've had to tamp down my rushing to get to the point, but it is excruciating many times. And the callers, I never get impatient with the callers, because people call on the show. You know why? Because from my mindset, they're calling, they're excited.
Absolutely.
They're on the show. And so I always think, we may have talked to a whole bunch of people prior to them, but this is the first time they're talking to us. And that means a lot to them. So, my line of thinking is let them, get to the point. I know it's an issue with me that I'll sort of interrupt, but that I'm kind of a paid interrupter on the show. I see a comedy opportunity coming on. I need to execute it, within the parameters of the context of whatever is being presented to me. And if I let it go too far, I've got to kiss it goodbye, because, then it becomes a non sequitur. So, in a way, it can be on that level, it can be daunting, but the fault is with me and not with anyone else.
All right, so let's go back to the very beginning for 1 second. So you were drawn to comedy as a kid. So what were those comedic influences?
So, well, I mean, I've always said, if you want to get the best, by far, the best education in comedy, look at the old Looney Tunes cartoons, the Fritz Freleng, Chuck Jones cartoons. You had visual comedy, you had verbal comedy, you had all of it, and those cartoons were obviously the first thing I started watching, and I loved it. And I can go up and down the line with my early stand-up influences. Would have been everybody from Robert Klein to George Carlin. I loved the Marx Brothers. I loved Laurel and Hardy. I loved Jerry Lewis.
Yes,
I loved Seinfeld. I loved Jay Leno's early. Yes, people, piss all over Jay Leno, and I'm sure that maybe he's paid people to piss on him. But the truth of the matter is that I think his earlier stuff was great, and that's why he ended up on Letterman so many goddamn times, was because Letterman thought he was a scream. And so that, that to me, and I've always said this to comedians who ask me for advice or anyone who's looking to do comedy, there are a whole bunch of rules to comedy that mean absolutely nothing. So, because if you get someone to laugh, if you execute the job, if you get that laugh and you do it in a way that I wouldn't call, excessively, cheap or whatever, and even that's not even a rule. As long as you have an audience that's happy and they're laughing and enjoying it, you're doing the job. So
absolutely, and you're the first person on the podcast to go that far back with like Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers. That's so cool. That's an early influence. I've seen their stuff, but as I get older, the more I want to go back and watch older comedy.
Well, actually, like I loved it. I can even go back further.
Vaudeville,
Aristotle. And he had some bits about his sexual encounters with the young boys around the Parthenon. The truth is, those things, for some reason, those things transcended for me. My dad was a big fan of those guys, and then I just got into it. Woody Allen, where comedy started to, and then you go on to The Real Deal. One of my main influences, absolutely, the National Lampoon.
Oh God, yeah.
Years ago, I mean, there were tangible shifts in comedy. The National Lampoon was one of them. The early Zucker Brothers, Kentucky Fried Movie.
Fried Movie is a gem that not many people know about. It is incredible.
I mean, what they basically did, they just, so before there was really, I love Ernie Kovacs. Ernie Kovacs predates me by decades, but Ernie Kovacs was one of the first, what the fuck, let's just do this. And he would just go for it. In fact, there was always a story that Ernie Kovacs, his show, there used to be a time in which you'd have shows that would air east of the Mississippi, and you'd have shows, for the different time zones. So Ernie Kovacs would be airing in the east, and there was always sort of a perception that the people who were writing for the Steve Allen show would sort of watch and kind of rip off what he was doing. And I think Steve Allen was great. I mean, I think there's a whole wealth of comedy that just sits there. If you talk about my current influences, Dave Attell, Norm Macdonald. Norm Macdonald, for me, when you want to talk about the state of the art as far as any, in economy, and phrasing, and every word, though it doesn't appear to, mean something.
Yes.
And he can get a concept that you would say, man, you're really going to be obvious if you try to wring comedy out of that. And he just does it. Dave Attell is the same way. Bill Burr. I mean, the ones that Dave Chappelle that are just seamless
on a different level. It's funny that you mentioned Dave Attell and Norm Macdonald first, because I started doing stand-up because in high school I loved Insomniac with Dave Attell, and my favorite part of the show was the first 2 minutes where he would be in the local comedy club. I loved that. Yeah. And then with Norm is my favorite comic to watch people watch. I love Norm, but when I remember Norm coming through Helium several times and him having some iffy shows because half the crowd are super on board because they know him and love him, and the other half are like, what the fuck is happening? Because he takes you for a weird ride. It could be 20 minutes, and
there's a listen, like you take a comedian that I know is a solid comedian, I should say, if you want to, if I want to use an antiquated term, Rita Rudner. Rita Rudner. I don't know if a lot of people remember.
Absolutely.
Very sort of delivery, and it was clear she had funny material, and it was clear that but I never, the delivery just killed it for me, and I just never liked it. Norm throws a lot of people off. They don't realize that he's brilliant. His ability to weave in, his bit about Hitler and taking, I have no use for him. I'm starting to think I don't have no use for this guy. That whole bit, the bit about, it was in his recent special about, how you that sort of when you get into a fight with your wife or whatever, you've done something, it's all in the way you respond, the tone. Yeah, of course I had sex with your sister. Of course. And so, but the structure and the economy of the language. I mean, Brian Regan's another one.
God. Oh,
yep. I mean, like completely tight, so tight and so good that it seems effortless, and that throws a lot of people off. So when I first started in comedy, when I first did it, I actually went to a open mic night at a place called Chuckles in Mineola in New York. Chuckles.
Was that your first set at Chuckles?
Yes, Chuckles in Mineola. And I got up, and who was the MC? Was it Jackie Martling, I believe, or somebody like that? Maybe, yeah, yeah. And I got up, and I had the sort of the inverse situation that most comedians have. I had a killer first set.
Okay,
so
good.
I did the, I brought the legal pad up on the stage. And I had it on the chair next to me, and it was open mic night, and that's what you're supposed to do. And I was just going through the stuff, and I killed. The second night was when I bombed, and so because you had an expectation, and then your mind suddenly becomes, how do I replicate what I did? And now you're concentrating more on method than the material, and believing in the material. And excuse me as I hiccup. And anyway, but that was, so I was off and running, and then started to do, more clubs, and started to do Governors. And the time that I was working in the comedy clubs, I was working alongside, Eddie Murphy was coming up. Rosie O'Donnell was, and his status name, who just done Star Search.
That is so cool. Yeah. Looking back and seeing how, everybody has success at different rates in different ways, but looking back and being like, that's the class you came up with, holy shit.
Yeah. There's a guy named Bob Nelson who was sort of legendary.
I know Bob. I've opened for him several times.
Yeah, and he was, and these guys were all really, and I'll tell you the thing I found out quickly. The people who were really talented and really good were always the most complimentary, the most willing to kind of work with you. The people who really didn't have it, they were the ones that were the most covetous. They would be the ones that would occasionally steal material. And I guess I became kind of known as a writer comedian.
Okay.
And so other comedians would ask me to write stuff for them. But you know what? And I've said this forever. Stand up, you do stand up so well. It's a craft that is you're always working at it. And to me, I hit a point where I was like, when the radio opportunity, became apparent and an option for me, I started to realize in fairly short order that I could hit in one morning, more people.
Absolutely.
And I would hit in a year's worth of and then some, exponentially touring. So I love stand up. I love doing it. But to me, it's an insult that people say, why don't you go back to stand up? I don't ever want to take anything away from working comedians. That's their main deal.
That's very thoughtful of you. Not many people have that angle, but you understand. I mean, I know what you mean. Nothing sucks than seeing taking a spot away. I see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, it used to suck when I'd be in a place and I was ready to go at a certain time, and somebody, and listen, I understand there's a pecking order, but somebody who's a much more established comedian would take, could bump your paying gig to come in and try out some stuff.
Yes, or in my case, in recent years, I've been bumped for a fucking YouTube star. Jesus Christ. Right. That's happened to me several times. I mean, the club will give me another date and we'll make it work, but it's this is stand-up comedy. I'm not here to show you a PowerPoint. I love talking about my life and making it relatable. Sorry, I'm not wearing a funky hat and a Hawaiian t-shirt, but I'm going to go stand on stage and do my act for an hour.
That's why I'm glad I dodged that one. I don't know how I could fucking, if I could stand there while somebody, who makes unboxing videos on YouTube, gets up on the stage and opens up a bagel cutter,
Yes.
that's on Amazon. I don't know if I'd be too happy with that. But the thing is that we talk about this many times. Preston and I have done a few things where it involves, the YouTube people, and God bless. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not, strike while the iron is hot. I get it, but they are, anytime you see them, they are completely fish out of water. It is an entirely different dynamic, and someone who hasn't been on stage. We had Colin Quinn on the other. Colin Quinn is another one, for Christ's sake. How could I forget that? Colin Quinn's one of a masterful comedian.
On a different level in so many different ways. He has a unique special every 2 or 3 years, or a book, or a movie.
Yeah. I mean, and he's innately funny. Some people have to work, at it and can still be extraordinarily funny. But his natural take on things. Robert Kelly's another one. I mean, I don't keep going, but anyway, these guys, they've got that muscle. But I mean, for the most part, the stand up and my love for it was informed by a lot of really great people who were very accommodating and helped me. And but then I reached a point. I switched from doing strictly stand-up clubs, and I started to realize at that time, believe it or not, Pat, there was a time when colleges were your best audiences because anything went. You could go, and you were, it was like, they get it. They're no matter how, whatever references, it didn't matter if the material was really pushing the boundaries. Everything was up for grabs. They got it. It was all a joke. And then even towards the end of my stand-up run, I started to see a shift. Like, what the fuck? Where the place where it always was an open area for, free expression, exchange of ideas, having fun with some concepts, rolling with stuff. It was like it was starting to get more restrictive, and I was like, what? And that's why you'll see a lot of the comedians. It used to be standard for colleges to have comedians, come in all the time. I used to, towards the end of when I was working, I was almost exclusively working colleges.
It's such good money too.
Yes, and because they would get money and they would have to spend it, or else they wouldn't get that budgeted money.
Absolutely. Some of my first paid gigs, I went to Temple University, and some of my first paid gigs, and it was minimal. It was like, I don't know, $50 or $100 to open the show. But I started in a comedy club, but I was also doing some shows on campus. But I remember college crowds because I was in college when this shift happened. And I was there when crowds were cool. And then shortly into it, there was that shift where you couldn't say certain things or the room would get weird.
I remember I was doing, now this is years ago, well before you were, had started. I was doing a show in San Luis Obispo in California. They flew me out. I drove. It was a wonderful, cool thing. I drove up the Pacific Coast Highway, went to the school there, and part of the deal was I was supposed to pretend I was a faculty member, and that I was welcoming them for orientation. And so, I kind of prepared a thing for them. It was sort of by request, and I wrote sort of a fresh set as if I was a faculty member welcoming them.
Okay.
And I said, hey, I'm looking at this, the students. There's about 1,000 of them, and I said, people say, you've been told that there's a difference between high school and college, and you always get asked, is there a tremendous difference between high school and college? And I say, well, that would be like asking me, is there a difference between jail and prison? And I would say, I don't know. I've only been in jail. So I forget what the exact phrasing or wording of it was, but the basic gist of it is that there's a convict up there, who's a faculty member. So they, and I go back. My agent, like 3 weeks later, gets a letter. A couple of those students thought I was being dismissive of convicts, and the plight they face in having to get work after they're released from prison. And I forget the exact wording. I've been at it since 3:45, so I'm sorry if it's not the
No, it's
exact. But the basic gist of it is, at that point, I'm like, oh my God, it was completely in context of something that was clearly a joke. And, I started to bristle at the notion of people who were getting offended for other people. And I'm like, come on.
on.
I once played for 500 Jesuit priests at Fordham University. And I show up, and at the last second, the woman who's booking the thing says to me, "Can you play clean?" I'm like, "You're asking me now?" Yeah, yes, I can. I can. Thankfully, I could and did, and I played for an entire auditorium full of priests.
And how did that go?
But it went great. But I mean, so that's how volatile my act was. Yeah, and yet this, I do this non-blue bit at this college, and I get that sort of feedback. It was just wild. And at that point, I started to realize, maybe this is drying up.
Oh man, dude, I performed at a Catholic university, and behind the stage, and I'm air quoting stage because it was like a boxwood platform, there were old paintings or portraits of nuns behind me, and I bombed so fucking bad. And I was just opening. I just had to do 20 minutes, and I kept it clean. And I was like, why? Comedy should never be in this environment. Never, 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 never.
No, I mean, a lot of times, listen, when you'll take the money, but the truth of the matter is, a lot of times it's you really need to read the room, know what kind of room you have. And mind you, I never, for the most part, it's, I understand. I say and do volatile things on the air all the time. That's my job. But people understand in the context of who I am, what we are about, what the show is about, what what we do, and that at a certain point, I mean, it used to. I know there were been competing shows, and we're on terrestrial, and we get away with murder. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that they accept it in the context. To me, I always had to wonder, like in a club. So okay, I get it. You're in a college, and you're there for one thing, and you're not expecting perhaps you haven't booked the comedian or whatever the story is. If you actively go to a comedy club and you go there and you're going on a night where, say, someone, like a really blue comedian is there who's known for that, and that's their thing, I think the onus is kind of on the audience goer to vet who they're going to see.
Absolutely. And I used to work at the box office at Helium, and people would call and complain, and I would be like, well, you should have checked on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
honestly,
your fucking fault.
Yeah, man. What do you expect to see? If you at this point, if you don't have a knowledge, at least a somewhat working knowledge about what you might encounter in a comedy club, then, now mind you, some comedians I've seen and I've known throughout my, up and comers or open micers or whatever, who think, man, okay, here's how I'm going to get them by just going ape shit. And, that doesn't work either. So it's not that I'm bereft of understanding as to why these different things happen. But I think that should be a safe space. That should be for comedians to just go do what they do. If you don't like it, don't go back to the club.
Absolutely. I've told many people there's the door. Not that I'm offensive or edgy or have a really, really raunchy set, but every now and then there's somebody out there who's not a fan. Well, then there's the door. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So I got to ask you, okay, as a stand-up, when we're on stage and our jokes are hitting, it's the best feeling in the entire world. It's a rush of euphoria you can't even describe. When you're crushing and the next thing you're about to say is going to murder, it's the best feeling in the world. Do you get any sort of rush with that doing radio, the same kind of vibe? Like if you are having a great segment and you say something funny, or if you ask an amazing question in the middle, do you still get...
I do. It's different, but I do. And so for me, what happens now is when people ask me what I remember clearly when, I was starting to think about stand-up and I was going to put the real push. I had my writing package. I kept trying to assail SNL, and I started to sort of chip away at, trying to get into that. Actually, a friend of mine, Joey Cola.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of was doing a lot of opening stuff, and circuitously, material of mine was sort of ushered through by Dennis Miller to an agency. They're incredibly protective. You can't just cold send material, they don't. The last thing in the world they want to do is be sued for material theft.
Absolutely.
So they won't open up anything. But anyway, so I was doing that, and I was playing at a club on Long Island, and I went to. They asked me to go do some commercials at the local radio station, which is WBAB on Long Island, a rock station. Club is the Brokerage, and I went up and I went in there, and a guy I had done some work with, and went to school with, college. It was in the radio department. He was there, and he asked me to help him do some comedy bits for the morning show. And I, for their morning show on the station. And so I said, yeah, why not? In my downtime, I could do it. And I did it. And I started to think, holy shit, I can do everything. I can do all the voices. I can, you could have control the way you wanted it over executing skits and bits and lines and jokes. And I found, yeah, you know what? That's having people laugh and hear it repeated and having people respond to it. It's a different kind of buzz, but it's cool. So getting back to my original point, I now say my job on air is to basically make Preston laugh.
Okay. Oh, okay. Is that your goal?
My goal is to make Preston, but I also have sort of a split goal in that, to me, I look at, I've heard Letterman describe this, and people will tell me this. If I say something and only one person laughs, I know a percentage of the audience that aligns, say, like with Nick's comedy sensibility, enjoyed that line.
Yes.
And then if no one laughs, a lot of times I'll get, and the edict is don't laugh. Don't force a laugh, don't fake a laugh. If you didn't find it funny, don't laugh. Because nothing is as obnoxious as forced cackle.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've been in studio with you guys several times, like whenever I headline Helium and stuff, and I'll do the segment and we'll have fun and we'll BS and we'll riff and we'll laugh, and then but I never know how it goes because I'm so used to audible feedback. Like I'll have friends text me like, "Oh my God, that was so funny, that was so great," and it's like, "Oh, that's good to know," because I'm just having a conversation and I'm not getting a reaction.
Yeah, no, it's. But and I always think, actually, some of my favorite moments are when I say something and you'll get emails or you'll see it on social media, and people say they were dying in their car because of something. And to me, I think there's a place for every type of sense of humor. The version of me that I think I enjoy doing the most on the air is sort of is the more playful, forced sort of. I'm naturally stupid to begin with, so I can access that no problem. And to be a little more innocent and confused, that to me is a little more what I'd call a little more obtuse. Like for example, we had a thing today, and it was just. I was doing a Bruce Springsteen riff, and I went off on something that came out of left field, and Preston lost it, and that sort of stuff, which just shouldn't make sense, does. There was a story about a duck without a bill, and I started to do the impression of what that might sound like, and these are the kind of things that were really. I love seeing two people in the. I love having the whole room laugh, obviously, but I also like Casey can't hold it together after something that I did, or that to me that means you're not one type of comedy. You're hitting different sensibilities.
You're hitting everybody,
and that's really the job. You have to. There's a phrase in radio that a good morning show casts a wide net. Comedically, that's what you should always do as well. You should be acerbic. You should be scatological.
Absolutely.
You should be you should be bawdy. You should be all of that stuff, because you can't, if you rely on one type of a comedy. You want everyone who's driving to work. You want that. I pissed myself. I nearly drove off the road, and that kind of feedback. It's a delay. It's different. But you know what I do? Like I'll wear my Apple Watch on my wrist, and I'm my Twitter. It'll ding. When people are tweeting, or I nearly passed out or whatever the story was, and I'll have it on my wrist, and I have that tap response, and I'll feel it start to tap if I'm ripping on something, and people are enjoying it. They'll actually start, tweeting out on social media that they're enjoying it, and it's kind of it's a weird, bizarre sensation, but it's cool.
A unique way to get a rush, but it's there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you are in control, the feeling. I mean, I did a show in a college in Louisiana one time. It was about 1,500, maybe 2,000 people. It was for orientation week. I was just playing, I was just doing regular set, my comedy. And to have an entire room, go quiet when you're taking your pauses, and then you set up a joke, and then it just slams.
Oh,
holy
dude,
shit.
I tell people this all the time. I say silence is just as important as the laughter because, yes, you're a comic. You want to crush and have the whole room rolling. However, when you are doing your setup and you could hear a pin drop, that is just as important. You have everybody's attention and they are hanging on your syllables waiting for the punch. That is just as much of a rush being in that kind of control as it is when the punchline hits and they go apeshit.
Yeah, it's everything. I mean, it's the coolest, and I mean, so people who are drawn to comedy realize that it's the mistake most first timers or comedians in the early stages of their career make is that they're rushing to get to the next line. They're not taking the pause, and you have to find out how you kill what you're doing during that time.
Dude,
and I also, one thing that benefited me early is I, and I get this from my dad. My dad is a very sarcastic. My mother was very sort of, she was more Monty Python in her sensibilities, while my dad was more, insult, Rickles-esque.
Okay, so like insult versus like goofy and silly kind of?
Right. Benign sort of, that sort of stuff. So, I could enjoy having a killer set, and I could also enjoy not doing well because I would start laughing.
Oh yeah!
If the audience was quizzically looking at me as I delivered lines that I knew were good because they had been tested, I would start to laugh. I did.
Dude,
there was a Jewish singles thing, 50 and over Jewish singles one night. I think it was a governor's.
Who was your agent? 50 over Jewish, 50 singles, 1,200 priests. Like,
yeah. Well, what happened was
NAMBLA conventions.
I was doing regular stand up, but I was also in a improv comedy troupe. So we would, and so what would happen is that a lot of the club owners would say, "Hey, could you do this?" And I'd say, "Oh, yeah, okay." So that's how I got these weird gigs. But I mean, they were looking at me, again, like the proverbial dog looking into a fan, and I was cracking up on stage, and I think ultimately they started to enjoy that I was enjoying my own set.
There is such a unique feeling in that when you do material that works and the crowd just isn't having it, you're like, well, here we go. And then I've been in that situation a million times. I start laughing, which I never laugh at my own shit, but I'm laughing at the situation.
Yeah,
you're like, man, even, if you do 2 shows in a one night and the early show is incredible and the late show blows, you're like, oh my God, this was murdering 3 hours ago and now it's getting crickets. And you're like, but you're just laughing at yourself.
Well, it's like Dan Soder was talking about, another. I keep throwing out names of people I think are fantastic. Soder's fantastic.
Pat House,
Big J is great. They work together a lot. But Dan Soder was saying, during COVID, he hasn't been able to really keep up on top of the stand-up. It's been daunting to say the least. So he's his first few gigs that he's been doing, he goes, yeah, I'm driving back and I go, oh my God, I suck at stand-up comedy. He doesn't. It's just you're dealing with limited audience size, and you look at SNL right now as they're doing they've got some audience members in there, so you have a partial audience. And one of the benefits of being a successful comedian is that you get a successful comedian's audience. You get a larger audience, which really increases the likelihood that something you say is going to get some people to laugh. and can in fact cause waves of laughter to ensue from that. You have a flashpoint, you reduce the likelihood, that's the phrase shooting fish in a barrel. If your barrel is 500 people, you're much more likely to hit with a joke, and you can hear it on SNL. It throws them off a little bit. They're doing it. They're getting traction, but it's not the same as a fully packed, enthusiastic, maskless audience.
Maskless, yep.
Yeah. So it's an interesting.
I'm glad that you mentioned Soder and Jay, because with the Soder thing, I have done a handful of live shows in Philly and on the road since things have opened back up, and I feel the same way because with stand-up, you can get rusty real quick. 10, 12 years ago, I hosted Greg Giraldo's last week at Helium. And I remember him saying, Greg told me, we're in the green room, and he goes, I feel so rusty. I haven't done stand-up in forever. And I asked him, how long's forever? And he said, I don't know, about 2 weeks. Like, that's how quickly you can get rusty if you're not doing your act every day or every other day.
So I need to then also add to that list Greg Giraldo.
Oh,
Greg
God.
Giraldo was, when we had him on the show, we had him on the show twice. The first time he was obviously fighting his addiction.
I remember that because I'm tight with Meredith, and I worked at Helium at the time. So oddly enough, I was young in college and in the background, but I was privy to all of this.
Greg Giraldo, I adore. And then he came in the second time, and he was awesome. He was with the Greg Giraldo that you wanted.
Yes.
There you go. I mean, that's a guy who took the art, the craft seriously. And the last thing you ever want to do is puff up something that you do. It's like, oh my God, I'm fucking Beethoven. I do fart jokes. Oh my God, where's my wing at the museum?
Yes.
But still, there is something to it, and that's why I always, to me, I take it with a great deal of respect. And when you're at people like at Greg Giraldo's level or Patrice O'Neill, these guys, just rock. So, but yeah, like we were talking to Colin Quinn, the average was 5 or 6 times a week for stand-up. That's what, always doing it, always working on new material, because it also, at a certain point, those people who are really committed to it. See, the difference was, Pat, is that a good comedian, and for people who aren't aware, they will sit and surgically tweak lines, and live with the same set for a while. With me, I think I come from a more improvisational bent, and so I got bored with my own material quickly.
Yes, I understand that. Yep.
And so radio turned out to be the great, perfect venue for me, the great outlet for what I like to do.
Now that's okay. To tag to that, you are so funny and hilarious and quick when you're with a guest or with a caller. Did you talk to the crowd at all? Or did you just have material? Because you're so great interacting with people. Was that part of your live show?
It started to become, and that's how I kept it fresh for me. Was that? Yeah, you picked up on that. Is that ability to interact, with the audience and generate stuff. If you want to see, probably right now, if you're going to talk about the maestro, the Stradivarius, crowd work, Big J's. I don't know. He's one of the top guys. Where you just go and you just do. Now, I used to do something similar, but I wouldn't do he'll do an hour. He'll do it. I would do a mix of material and crowd work, improvisational stuff.
Yeah, he's killer at that. And what's funny? I had this thought 20 minutes ago, lost it, and you just brought it back. Big J got me started. I was at Temple University. I was 19 years old. He performed. He crushed, murdered. I could probably still quote his first 30 minutes. Right. This is 15 years ago. So anyway, I'm talking to him after the show because he mentioned he was from Philly. And I said, I want to start doing stand-up. He told me where to go, who to talk to. And a week later was my very first set because Big J told me where to go at the Laugh House and who to talk to, the legendary Wid. And literally a week later, I started doing stand-up and have not stopped.
And there you go. Here's to my earlier point. Big J is super talented, super nice, encouraging, and those are the people who make the difference. In your, and I always try to pay that forward, and I always try to, to do that, because you look at people like Big J and so many. I mean, for Christ's sake, David Tell came down. David Tell he never forgets. Joe Rogan has been great to us. I mean, those guys, we had to make a concerted effort on the show when, after a while, with morning shows, and I don't, there were a lot of morning shows out there that were not providing, let's just say, a good experience for comedians coming on in the morning.
Okay.
And
all right.
So we shifted, I said, just in general, in the way we were interviewing years ago, we need to stop interrogating and just start interviewing, have a conversation. And the eating came up quickly. We're not going to ask comedians to do material. The notion of a preset. So what do you want?
Yep.
What do you want us to hit? What do you want us to say? And a lot of times on TV when they're, as people are aware, they get a pre-interview. So, that's why, somebody pulls out of their ass. So I hear you're raising alpaca. Really? You fucking heard that? Wait, was everything in the bathroom?
I know. Oh, as a comic and a listener, it sounds so insincere. Right. Oh, I heard your mom was on vacation last week. What?
Yeah. Well, on radio, exactly right. So on radio, I make sure to do an extensive amount of research. I'll pull stuff out. Preston does as well. We all do, because we'll get him for 40, 45 minutes. We'll do close to an hour. We have that latitude if it's somebody who's there and it's working. You have to do those things. You have to make you somebody who's coming in, especially a comedian. We built up the relationship with comedians, because to me there are a couple things. If you put out an informal rule book, let's say, don't press them to do material.
Yes,
because if they're shooting their proverbial load on air, and then you're going to say, "Hey, come down and see this again tonight and pay for it." No. So let have a good conversation. If they're funny, they're going to be funny in conversation.
Absolutely, and you're comfortable rolling with it because you are funny. And honestly, being in studio with you guys taught me that, because I've done other radio shows where you give them pointers and they feed you softballs, and it's like, I'm doing my act for one other person with no audience. But then when you go in and roll, I trust myself in a conversation to be funny, and then you sell yourself that way.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the way we approach it. And over time, I mean, honestly, the comedians have been so supportive, and everybody comes in, and the word of mouth gets around. So there was some survey, I forget what journal, comedians magazine or trade or industry magazine, and we were in the top two, or one of the top two or top three shows, radio shows for comedians to come in and where they felt, and the word got out.
Oh,
so you get people like a Taylor coming in, and he's saying, guys are always the best and supportive, and thanks so much, and and to me listen, we want you to come in, and we want you to be comfortable and just do what you want to do. We're going to work with you. We're going to do the best we can to make you shine and give you a platform to really do your deal, because our audience will benefit from you being great, and then hopefully we can benefit you by giving you a good turnout at whatever event you're approaching or promoting. And the old notion of and it comes from a story, I guess, about Carson. I heard Johnny Carson years ago. I forget, somebody was asking him, a comedian had been on the Tonight Show a particular night, and they asked him, "Hey, does it bother you when somebody comes on and kind of blows it out of the water, and is it too much?" And he says, "No." He says, because the next day people will say, "Did you see the Johnny Carson show last night?" And that's always resonated with us. come kill on our show.
Along the same lines, years ago, there's a documentary called When Stand Up Stood Out. It's a documentary about Boston comedy and how the boom in the 80s started.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Bobcat said something similar. He said, like, whether you loved me or hated me, no matter what, I guarantee you remembered me the next day. Because he would do a regular stand-up set, or he'd put on makeup for a stand-up set, or do something very off the wall. But he's like, the bottom line was, tomorrow you remembered me.
Right, and then you've got to rise above the others. So yeah, but for me and for obviously you're you obviously got the podcast, which is you're doing in the stand up and everything. For me, I found radio to be the absolute the top of the tops as far as where I feel the most at home, getting to do what I do. And it's been great. It's been, and it continues to be. And oddly enough, which we're blessed, things we never give ratings on the air, stuff like that. You introduce we're number one, and we've been number one for a long time. But for me, and you always used to kill me when radio shows would say, "Well, here's what we did in this demo, and here's what we did with that demo." Either you like us or you don't.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, fuck, everybody in town thinks this pizza place is the best. I think it's like eating rat shit, but I guess I'm going to eat it because it seems to be good. Everyone else seems to think it's good. So either you like us or you don't, and so our job is to not, you're not going to, it's like the notion that we always had with billboards. If you put up on a show up on a billboard, billboards for us always represented proof to the audience that listens to you, you're worthy of a billboard. Who has ever looked at a billboard for a radio show and said, "Oh my God, I love those colors. I've got to listen to this show." No, maybe if it's a scene from Avatar and you're promoting a movie or a clip like that, maybe something like that. But otherwise, it's a different animal. So these are just things that over time we really, Preston and I have always kind of seen eye to eye on these aspects of the show. And one of them right from the get-go was making sure that we kind of undid the damage that lesser prepared shows did in dealing with comedians and interviews in general. And that's why we do what we do the way we do.
And you guys are great at it, and we're very grateful here in Philadelphia. And I haven't even mentioned this yet. I've been listening to you guys since I was 14. I was at actually, to this day, I will say this, the best concert I ever went to was the 98 Y100 Festival. I still have my Fez. Brett Hamilton signed it.
That Y100 is near and
oh
near.
My God, I grew up. I still have the pamphlet that came with it. It was Green Day, Everclear, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Ben Folds 5. This show was 22, 23 years ago. I still regard that as the best all-day show I've ever attended in my entire life.
So we did DRE.
I did WDRE.
Right. So there was the legendary modern rock, what they call progressive stations before alt. It's been called different things. LIR in New York and K Rock in LA, and then there was another station in Manhattan, PIX. LIR became DRE. There's actually a documentary that was on Showtime. It's called Dare to Be Different. And if you watch that focuses in on the time, probably about 8 months before I arrived. DRE went away because they lost the license, but it came back essentially as exactly the same station, except it was DRE, Dare to Be Different. And so we started working. I started working. I was doing more the comedy for the morning, doing comedy commercials and promotion, promos on air. And that was my job, that I was doing there. When I came off the road with stand-up, I started doing that. And then DRE started to simulcast down in Philadelphia. And then the decision was made to give Philadelphia its own version of DRE.
Oh, cool.
Which occurred. And so the station actually split. It wasn't tethered to New York as it initially had been. DRE in Philadelphia went away, and 80% of the air staff and people behind DRE went over to Y100 at that time. So Y100 became a really kick-ass alternative station, and we were the morning show there. And honestly, I love the station. The company, that eventually ended up owning it, could give a rat's ass. They never advertised us, they never promoted us, and we were really starting to do well in the mornings. We really became, something that was working. It was after we used to be Preston, Maryland, and Steve. Maryland left for some family issues and home issues, and it became the Preston and Steve Show. And after that point, when it was clear that Howard was leaving, mornings on
WYSP, yeah.
Up in New York, it was K Rock, and things were changing. The other stations started coming to court us, YSP and MMR, and people like Pierre and MMR had always come out and supported Y100 events, and there were some fine people at YSP as well. But we sort of our edict was, because we had gotten word actually that the company that owned Y100 here was not, we were the only non hip hop and or gospel station in their cluster. I mean, we were absolutely the fish out of water.
The odd man out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we knew that, the time was limited. So even though we were performing well for them, but, we basically said we want to do the show as is. And YSP and MMR, that was what we were putting out there. That was our deal. And MMR immediately said, absolutely, come do it. Come do it exactly as it is. And we want everyone to come with us.
It's monumental. That's awesome. You guys have crazy success here, and we love it. I mean, I know you guys personally, and I still listen all the time. So it means a lot to me that you guys help me, because I've been in studio with you guys, and you guys plug when I'm headlining Helium. It's an incredible two-way street. It's awesome.
I love it here. I love that vibe. I love the that sort of camaraderie. I mean, it's a really, listen. We once we get past all this shit, and we will get past all the restrictions and all that stuff. This isn't the norm. This isn't the new normal, as people are saying. There are going to be some things that hopefully we carry and port past this that we like and that have worked, but nothing can compete with like what you do in a great comedy club, like Helium or Punchline or any of it. All of that experience needs to return. It's a quality of life issue, and it will.
It will. I have faith in it. It just sucks when you're in it. It's like bombing. It sucks when you're in it, but it's going to be over.
I tell people, I'm an old fuck, so I know. I've been through a lot. Like my dad, he was in World War II. He's like, yeah, okay,
yeah. Comparatively,
yeah. There was a point. Hitler. The name Hitler gets bandied about quite a lot. My dad was actually fighting the real Hitler, and there is a marked difference. So, that said, we can get past it, and we will.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to let you go here 1 second. I just want to mention one thing very quickly. So I imagine your beginnings in stand-up were all on Long Island. Most of your first sets were on Long Island.
Yeah.
Man, I used to open for Sebastian Maniscalco a lot, and we had a run on Long Island. We had 12 shows at the Paramount Theater in Huntington, and then we had, I think, 3 or 4 shows down in the Hamptons, and I ate it. Like 12 of the 14 shows. I mean, ate it. And I was I'm an established comic. I'm hoping for a big name in the theater. I just had a rough go, man. I can't crack Long Island to save my life.
You know what? It's a tough thing. Listen, you would be surprised because there is a tremendous amount of similarity between, I love the blue collar, I love Philadelphia. I love working class Philadelphia. I love the support. I love the loyalty. And in many ways, there's a strong similarity to a lot of what is happening. I always say, for me, Philadelphia has, virtually everything I love about New York with half the bullshit.
Mhm.
You know, but you do have an element of being jaded a little bit, and I would keep at it. One of my best shows. I mean, I had a lot of great shows. One of my best shows was out in the Hamptons, where I basically did all crowd work, and it seems insurmountable, but you're too good to not. Yeah.
It was just a weird week because I mean, when you're opening for a celebrity in a theater, they're there to see him. So I get it. But the one show in the Hamptons, it's not going well at all. But I'm trucking through. But there is a guy up front who looks like he's enjoying it, so I kind of focus on him. And I'm like, man, that guy looks like Tony Danza, and it was. And after the show, he came in my dressing room and was like, "Hey, man, that was a great set." He literally said, "Fuck these people," and I was feeling down about my set. It was a bad night, and then I got the much needed pep talk from Tony Danza. Like, what a weird, like, what the fuck is happening? But he was awesome. But yeah, that was just man. Long Island has had. Just were the crowds always chatty there? I had to hush every crowd in a theater.
Yeah.
In a theater.
I know there's this presumption, but I mean that's the same thing. You'll find that shit going on in movie theaters where people drop have a couple people $50-$60, and then they're talking. I think yes, yeah. The short answer is yeah. I mean that's part of the deal. You enter into the to the Thunderdome, and you take command. I think I don't see it being that much. You just continue at it. You'll get him sooner or later. Because,
absolutely.
Honestly, there used to be the old legend about working the Apollo Theater in Harlem, and how the story goes. People had absolutely, literally the worst sets of their life there, the most critical audience in the world, and yet when you hit it, it's a defining moment. It's like holy shit. So you're going to you'll find that up there. The clubs, the clubs. I don't even know what the club action is like.
I don't either.
Governors is still there.
Governors, Brokerage, and there's something else, but yeah.
Do Manhattan.
Oh, I have. I've had great sets in Manhattan at like Gotham and whatnot, but it's just when people, they're paying a lot of money to see Sebastian Maniscalco in a theater, like, who the fuck is this guy? And are we even going to give him a chance? Sometimes yes, but it was mostly no.
Well, look at this. It's like being the opening band. It's like being well, hell, here's a perfect example. I take this analogy. We were going to see you 2 years ago. It was at was it the Wells Fargo at the time, or was it I forget which iteration it was.
First Union Core States had the 15 names. The FU Center.
Kings of Leon, the opening
I was there.
act. And
that was the Vertigo tour.
Yeah, right. People were just like filtering in during Kings of Leon, and then Kings of Leon are hot, are headlining that venue. So it's all relative,
It is, man. Well, dude, thank you for joining me. Thank you for giving me the time. This was so awesome to chat with you about, cause I mean, I've known you forever, but I didn't even, and I know you did stand up, but I, as a buddy, didn't even know your full backstory. So thank you for sharing, man.
I hope I was semi-coaching.
No, dude, that was fantastic. All right. Thank you. Thanks, man. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.